Hello everyone, and welcome back to Boss Economic World. The show where we slice through the market noise, filter out the PR spin, and serve you the unfiltered economic truth, with a side of humor because, let's face it, sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying. Today, November 7th, 2025, we're taking a trip to the heart of Europe's industrial engine, Germany. We're going to talk about something so fundamental to the German identity it might as well be on their flag, the automobile. The Volkswagen. The people's car. But what happens when the people's car is no longer for the people? What happens when a symbol of middle-class freedom becomes a luxury good? You get a quiet crisis brewing in places like Bochum, a gritty industrial city in Germany's Rust Belt. And trust me, this isn't just a German story. This is a story about a broken social contract, a clash between green ideals and economic reality, and how a family-run car dealership became an unwilling prophet of Europe's deepening inequality. So, buckle up. We're about to take a deep dive into why your next new car might be completely out of reach. Meet Kirsten Feeks. Let's call her Sister Feeks. Her family has been selling cars in Bochum for nearly a century. This isn't some slick, glass and steel megadealer. This is a place built on handshakes and repeat customers, nurses, factory workers, the backbone of the German economy. For decades, their bread and butter was selling brand new, affordable hatchbacks and wagons. The kind of car you buy for your first job, or when you start a family. But if you walk into Autofeeks today, you won't find a single factory fresh car on the lot. Not one. Why? Because as Sister Feeks puts it, her customers simply have less money in their pockets. Now, less money is a polite way of saying the German middle class is being squeezed like a lemon in a vice. We've all felt the pinch since the great inflation spike of the early 2020s. Housing, food, energy, everything costs more. But the sticker price on new cars? That hasn't just risen, it has blasted off into a different orbit. Let's put some numbers on this, because that's what we do here at Boss Economic World. Back in 1995, the average German needed about 32 weeks of wages to buy an average new car. A hefty chunk of change, but manageable. Fast forward to today, late 2025. How many weeks do you think it is now? According to the latest data, that number has ballooned to nearly 48 weeks. Almost a full year's salary for a new car. Think about that. You work for an entire year, and every single cent of your pre-tax income goes to paying for your vehicle. That's not a purchase, that's a form of servitude. Sister Feeks saw this coming. She saw her loyal customers walk in, look at the sticker prices, shake their heads, and walk out. So she did what any smart business owner does, she adapted. She expanded her repair bays, because people are now desperate to keep their old cars running for as long as humanly possible. And she pivoted her entire sales floor to second-hand models, usually less than a year old. Why? Because that initial, brutal depreciation hit has already happened, and she can sell them for thousands of euros less. As she says, the price is the most important thing. The brand loyalty, the shiny new features, that's all secondary. People know they can't afford what they used to, and they're angry about it. Autofeeks isn't just a car dealership anymore. It's a barometer of social discontent. So, who's the culprit here? Who killed the affordable car? This isn't a simple whodunit. It's more like Murder on the Orient Express, where everyone had a hand in the crime. Let's line up the suspects. Suspect number 1, the inflation monster. This is the obvious one. The post-pandemic supply chain chaos, the energy crisis following the conflict in Ukraine, it all sent the cost of raw materials like steel, aluminum, and plastic soaring. The microchips we need for everything from your engine management to your infotainment system became as rare and precious as dragon eggs. Naturally, car makers passed these costs directly on to you. No surprises there. Suspect number 2, the Brussels rulebook. This is a more controversial figure. For years, the European Union has been on a crusade to make cars safer and cleaner. And on the surface, who can argue with that? We're talking about mandatory features that were once the domain of a Mercedes S-Class: automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assistance, driver fatigue detection, sophisticated emissions control systems. But here's the economic truth: there's no such thing as a free safety feature. Every sensor, every line of code, every catalytic converter adds cost. Antonio Filosa, the big boss at Stellantis, the giant that owns Peugeot, Fiat, and Opel, said it himself. He complained that the EU is imposing a pace which is not what the customer wants, not what the customer needs, not what the customer can afford. It's a classic case of good intentions paving the road to, well, a road with no affordable cars on it. Suspect number 3, the real mastermind, the premiumization strategy. And this, my friends, is the Boss Economic World reveal. While inflation and regulation are real factors, they're also a convenient smokescreen for what's really going on, a deliberate, calculated strategic shift by the automakers themselves. As David D. Girolamo from the auto data firm JATO puts it, car manufacturers are no longer as focused on volume as they once were. The old game was to sell as many cars as possible, even if the profit on each little Ford Fiesta or VW up was tiny. The new game? Prioritize high-margin vehicles. Think about it from a CEO's perspective. Why go through the headache of producing 100 little city cars to make a €100,000 profit when you can sell just 10 high-spec, feature-loaded SUVs and make the same amount, or even more? This isn't an accident. It's a choice. They are actively unfriending the lower and middle classes. We've seen a mass extinction event for small cars. The Ford Fiesta, a European icon for nearly 50 years, is gone. The Volkswagen Up, gone. The Citroën C1, the Opel Atom, all sent to the great scrapyard in the sky. The result? The entry point to new car ownership has been violently shoved upwards. The Fiat Panda, for decades the face of affordable Italian mobility, cost around €9,000 in 2010. Today in 2025, the new hybrid version starts at nearly €16,000. That's an 80% price hike in 15 years, far outstripping any wage growth. Car makers have effectively built a wall around their showrooms with a sign that says, if your salary doesn't start with a comfortable, please see our used car department. But wait. I hear you cry. What about electric cars? Aren't they the future? Aren't they supposed to save us all? Ah, yes. The great EV transition. The centerpiece of the EU's climate strategy. The automakers told us this was the path forward. Volkswagen even positioned its ID.3 as the Beetle of the electric era, a car for the masses. Well, let's check the price tag on that electric people's car. As of this morning, the cheapest VW ID.3 will set you back €33,330. For comparison, a brand new VW Polo, its gasoline-powered sibling, starts at around €21,500. The car for the people costs over 50% more than an actual car for the people. This isn't a transition, it's a class divider. The government can talk all it wants about green goals, but they've created a two-tier system: those who can afford the €30 to €40,000 entry fee to the EV club, and those who are stuck breathing their exhaust fumes. And here's where the plot thickens, because while European automakers are busy building expensive EVs for their existing affluent customers, a new challenger has entered the arena. From the east, the Chinese dragon has arrived. Companies like BYD, or Build Your Dreams, aren't just building EVs. They're building affordable EVs. Right now, in Germany, you can buy a BYD Dolphin, a fantastic, well-equipped electric car, for as little as €22,990. Let me repeat that. While VW is trying to sell you an electric dream for over €33,000, BYD is handing you the keys to a comparable car for almost a third less. That's not a price gap, that's a chasm. It's a full frontal assault on the European auto industry's home turf, using the very weapon they abandoned, affordability. The European automakers are caught in a classic pincer movement. On one side, they have the high-cost structure forced by EU regulations and their own premium strategy. On the other side, they have Chinese competitors who have mastered battery technology and economies of scale, and are ready to flood the market with cars people can actually buy. This economic pressure isn't just staying in the showroom. It's spilling out into the streets and, more importantly, into the ballot box. When you mess with something as culturally significant as the car in Germany, you're playing with fire. As Professor Oliver Nachtwey notes, the car is still bound up with the idea of freedom, autonomy, and independence. Taking that away, or making it prohibitively expensive, isn't just an economic inconvenience. It's perceived as an attack on a way of life. It deepens the sense of exclusion and resentment that is fueling political turmoil across the continent. Remember the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protests in France? They were sparked by a fuel tax, a green policy that hit working people's wallets. In Germany, this discontent has a name: the AfD, the far-right alternative for Germany. The AfD is surging in the polls, particularly in former industrial heartlands like Bochum. Their message is simple and powerful: the elites in Berlin and Brussels, with their green agendas and out-of-touch policies, are betraying you. They're taking away your jobs, your traditions, and your affordable car. Christian Luz, an AfD lawmaker from Bochum, points to the shuttered Opel plant and says the auto industry is building electric cars for richer people and families are being left behind. He's not wrong about the facts, and that message resonates powerfully with the policeman, the nurse, the factory worker who just wants a reliable car to get to work. This is having a seismic effect on mainstream politics. Conservative leaders like Friedrich Merz are now frantically backtracking, pushing the EU to soften or scrap the planned 2035 ban on new combustion engine cars. Why? Because they're terrified of the AfD's appeal. The affordability crisis has turned the EV transition from a technical challenge into a full-blown culture war. The government has tried to patch this with incentives for lower-income households to buy EVs. But this is a classic case of policymakers not understanding reality. Great, you give a family a subsidy for a €28,000 EV. But they live in a rented apartment on the 4th floor. Where are they supposed to charge it? Dangle an extension cord out the window? They're still reliant on expensive public charging stations, which completely negates the cheap fuel benefit of owning an EV. This policy doesn't bridge the gap, it just highlights the divide. So, is there any hope on the horizon? The European automakers, feeling the heat from both politics and Chinese competition, are scrambling. VW has announced the ID. Polo, a smaller EV promised for below €25,000. Its sister brand Skoda has the epic crossover at a similar price point. But let's be real. Is €25,000 the new affordable? For many, that's still a huge stretch. In Germany, a country we think of as a wealthy paradise, nearly 1 in 5 people is at risk of poverty or social exclusion. For them, a €25,000 car is still a fantasy. Which brings us back to Bochum and our pragmatic hero, Sister Feeks. She isn't waiting for a politician's promise or a CEO's press release. She's living in the real world. She sees the frustration and quiet anger in her customers, the feeling of being written off by the very system they helped build. Her solution? It's not glamorous. It's not revolutionary. It's simply to sell them high-quality, nearly new combustion engine cars. Cars they can afford, cars they can rely on. By doing this, she saves them thousands of euros and keeps them on the road. The story of the German car in 2025 is no longer about the triumph of the people's car. It's a cautionary tale of a broken promise. It's the story of a social contract, forged in the post-war economic miracle, being torn up in a frantic pursuit of higher profit margins and ambitious green ideals that forgot to ask one simple question: who is going to pay for all this? The answer, as always, was the average person. The very people who are now finding themselves stranded on the side of the road, watching the expensive electric future drive right past them. And in the vacuum left behind, it's pragmatists like Kirsten Feeks who are keeping the engine of society running, one used car at a time. That's all the time we have for today. Think about that the next time you see a car ad. Until next time, stay informed and stay critical.